batla dikgomo tse lesome.
O tlile mkhonyana ra re batla go metse some
tse lesome nka se di kgone go tse 80 ke tsona tse nka re di kaonenyana.
nna ke na go metse 80 ga ke na go metse 10
nna ke re kgomo tse 80 a ke di batle nka tse 9
nna ba re kgomo ba dumela 9 monna mosadi kwa gago
tse 9 di lokile.
ke tse kgomo tseo di lokile.
Tshwarana ka matsogo.
Re timetse re tla bonana ka la boraro.
Mkhonyana re
It may look like bargaining, but it goes a little further than that. Everyone is satisfied because agreement has been reached. Everything is in order. There's to be a wedding. In southern Africa, all tribal marriages are preceded by the system of lobolo, or bride wealth, as we call it. Now, let me explain very briefly some of the underlying principles of lobolo. Well, first of all, it means that a man is required to transfer certain marriage goods to the home of his future father-in-law. And traditionally, this has been in the form of cattle. But one thing I must emphasize is that lobolo is not regarded as a dowry, and it is certainly not regarded as compensation for a man who has lost a daughter in marriage. The real function of lobolo is to validate marriage, and it entitles a man to certain privileges over his newly acquired wife. For example, she becomes sexually available to him, and she assumes a host of responsibilities, both as a housewife and as a worker in the fields. But should she neglect these duties, or be unfaithful to him, or simply not come up to scratch, he can induce her to mend her ways on the strength of the lobolo he was obliged to provide before the marriage. It mustn't be assumed, as it often is, that lobolo caters only for the rights of men. On the contrary, it protects women against inconsiderate and unruly husbands who fully realize the possibility of losing not only a spouse but also the lobolo should they be found guilty of serious misconduct. In other words, lobolo has a stabilizing effect on tribal marriage and is very definitely the main contributory factor to the very low incidence of tribal divorce. You see, it does far more than link a man and a woman in marriage. It also unites their families, forming them into a large and intimate group of kinsmen. In Southern African tribal societies, there are a few fundamental rules governing marriage. For example, a woman may not be married to more than one husband at a time, which may sound self-evident, but one must remember that there are societies in the world where a woman may in fact have more than one husband. A man, on the other hand, may be married to 1, 2, 5, 10 women at a time. And there are influential rulers that have 20, and at least one that I know very well who has over 80. Once the wedding ceremony is over, the bride takes leave of her people and moves in with the groom, which entails having to live in his parents' kraal and coming under direct control of her mother-in-law. She has to serve her, cook for her, help with family chores, and even work in the corn and maize lands. And she may have to remain in this position even after she has had children or has moved to a separate kraal with her husband. She can become emancipated from this somewhat subservient situation, provided her husband takes a second wife, because then this woman becomes junior to her, taking her place and falling under direct control of the mother-in-law. It has always been a source of interest to me to see the deep respect afforded middle-aged and older women by their sons' wives. Indeed, strange as it may seem, a daughter-in-law never shows resentment towards her husband's mother. It is an association which has been inculcated over the centuries and is seen as a real privilege that comes to women sooner or later in their later years. At the Tribal Authority Courthouse of Tembuland, deep in the mountains of the Transkei, preparations are underway for a wedding, an unusual and very special wedding. From the remotest corners of the territory, chiefs, headmen and councillors have assembled to discuss the impending marriage of the Paramount Chief. For the Paramount Chief, his family and all Tembuland, this wedding will represent one of the most important and spectacular occasions in the more recent history of the territory. The Paramount Chief's brother, Chief Albert Babilanga Dalindyebo, is to be the master of ceremonies. He discusses the final arrangements with the chiefs and other dignitaries, who in turn will carry the news to all parts of the territory, involving the Paramount Chief's subjects in preparation for the wedding.
Item 2, introduction of distinguished guests by the Master of Ceremonies.
The Paramount Chief himself adds to the words of the Master of Ceremonies. His requirements are carefully noted. Every effort will be made to meet them. After the meeting, the dignitaries continue to discuss the ins and outs of the wedding ceremony, much of which will include practices that have not been witnessed in Tembuland for 3/4 of a century. They exchange opinions, dwelling on even the smallest details, because nothing must be left to chance. It is the eve of a great wedding to be held here in Tembuland, and it is said to be the most spectacular arranged in some 70 years. The groom is Paramount Chief Sabata Dalindyebo, and the bride is Princess Beatrice Njokweni of the Ciskei. Now let me tell you a little bit about the imposing lineage from which the Paramount Chief stems. He ranks in birth among the most important royal personages, not only in Xhosa territory, but in all tribal South Africa. The founder of the Tembu people is said to have been Uzwide, the illustrious Uzwide as he's called, and he ruled around about the latter part of the 6th century AD, that is about 1400 years ago. The present Paramount Chief Sabata is 23rd in the line of Tembu rulers. Perhaps it is worth mentioning that about 500 years ago, when Bartholomew Dyers landed at a place called Kakadu, which later became known as Algoa Bay, and then still later as Port Elizabeth, he met a chief called Kudume, and this chief was the 9th of the Tembu chiefs in that important lineage. They became great friends, they had meetings which proved to be most convivial, and eventually when the explorer left, he presented the chief with a cross as a token of his esteem. But to return now to the wedding that we're about to witness. It is rivaled in magnitude only by the wedding of the Paramount Chief's grandfather, Ngangilizwe, whose rule reached its zenith at the beginning of the 1900s.
Down in the valley at Bumbani, the great place, home of the Paramount Chief, preparations for the wedding continue in anticipation of the 40,000 to 50,000 people expected to attend. Among them will be other Paramount Chiefs, scores of chieftains and other dignitaries from neighboring territories and farther afield, as well as black politicians, prominent black businessmen from urban areas, and a handful of invited white guests. For some time now, news of the Paramount Chief's marriage to the princess has been echoing throughout the valleys of the Transkei. Meanwhile, the cattle fold stands empty It is here that the culmination of the wedding ceremony will take place.
When a paramount chief or even a lesser ruler marries, his subjects are expected to contribute generously towards the wedding expenses. The more wealthy people are likely to donate cattle or even money towards the lobolo, or marriage goods that have to be transferred from the groom's home to the home of his parents-in-law. Other people are likely to contribute cattle and sheep for slaughtering, and others foodstuffs and large quantities of sorghum beer. The poorer people might bring no more than huge faggots of wood for the fires, or pots and other cooking utensils. In this way, the economic pressures are shared by many people rather than left for one man to bear. And considering that no invitations are extended to subjects, it stands to reason that they feel doubly welcome to attend by virtue of the donations they made.
Many of the guests have come from the remotest parts of the territory to take part in the celebrations and to pay their respects to the Paramount Chief. During the past 6 months, Peter Becker has been a key figure in the arrangements for the wedding. This came about at the request of Paramount Chief Sabata, whom he has known for many years, calling for several journeys from Johannesburg to Tembuland. But at last, the great day has arrived. The lengthy preparations are about to be fulfilled as the two royal houses, one of the Transkei, the other of the Ciskei, are soon linked by marriage.
The Uduli, or bridal party, has arrived at the border between Dzaleka-land and Tembuland. It may not cross into Paramount Chief Sabata's territory before it has been met and welcomed by a Tembu envoy. Joseph Kobo has been assigned this privilege, and I might add that it was he who brought a small group of Tembu dignitaries to me in Johannesburg to discuss my role in the marriage arrangements. The Uduli party is headed by Chief Vusahlanga Njokweni and consists of the bride, royal men and women, and attendants of the Njokweni royal house. The long-awaited moment has arrived, an opportunity to snatch a glimpse of Princess Beatrice's face. But this is not to be, at least not yet. For in accordance with tradition, she must be obscured from sight wrapped in a blanket, and must be particularly careful not to expose her face until the following day, when she is called before her husband-to-be. During the hours following her arrival at the groom's settlement, she will be confined in her wrappings to a special hut set aside for her and her personal attendants. Now members of the bridal party take up residence in the huts provided them by the groom. Among them is a diviner, also a male attendant, the Nozakuzaku, who sees to the cooking, arranges for wood and water to be fetched, and makes sure the bride's needs are met. In the meantime, the male members of the party prepare to visit the Paramount Chief. The cattle fold, hub of tribal settlements, and venue of numerous ceremonial activities. Word has been received by the bridal party that the groom is ready to meet them. So the leader has come to present Paramount Chief Sabata with the importulo, that is an ox for slaughter. In the course of the discussions, a small money token is given to Chief Vusahlanga Njokweni, head of the party, as a symbol of total agreement in all matters concerning the marriage. I might add that the lobolo or bride wealth provided by the Paramount Chief amounted to 100 head of cattle. Now the importulo ox must be killed according to tradition, and the opening phase of the wedding ceremony has begun.
It is the following day, the wedding day. As the praise singers extol the virtues, the lineages, the historical highlights of all the important persons involved in the ceremony, the crowds pour in, swelling into many thousands. All await the arrival of the first important group, the Paramount Chief, his brother Chief Albert, Master of Ceremonies, and Paramount Chief Kaiser Matanziba.
It must be mentioned that Paramount Chief Sabata and Princess Beatrice have in fact been man and wife for 15 years. The significance of today's wedding, among other things, is officially to declare her the great wife of the Tembu royal house. She will be senior to the other royal wives by virtue of the choice of the elder of the two sons, the young Prince Buyalikaya, as the heir apparent and successor to Paramount Chief Sabata.
To begin with, I have the honor to introduce to you the Paramount Chief Sabata Dalinye. I wish to extend a cordial welcome to all the visitors who are here today. And at the same time, I wish to thank them for their presence from the bottom of my heart. The ceremony which you are witnessing today is a traditional ceremony in the Tikaka family. In pursuance of our tradition, you see here Paramount Chief Daliwonga Matanzi. He has come here mainly to apportion the wives according to their houses. I am going to call upon Dr. Peter Becker to come to us so that everybody can have a glimpse of him.
Come this way, sir. Nango
ugqirha uPeter Becker apha ecaleni kwam.
He is a great friend of the Paramount Chief who is getting married today. He has been the main link between the Great Place here and other organizations. I wish to thank Dr. Becker most heartily on behalf of the Great Place. Thank you.
The allocation of the Tembu royal wives to their various ranking houses will be done by Paramount Chief Kaiser Matanzima. It only remains for the bride and her party to arrive. The moment has come. Princess Beatrice Nomosko Njokweni, future great wife of the Tembu royal house, is shown to her place facing Paramount Chief Matanzima.
At this stage, I'm now going to call upon the Honorable Paramount Chief Daliwonga Matanzima.
Lotego.
The Master of Ceremonies.
Xhosa. Abulle. Inkosi zabaTembu ubaThembu.
Ladies and gentlemen, all tribes, all nations are marked and distinguished by their customs and traditions. The Tembus are an important section of the Transkei nation and are playing a significant part in promoting peace, economic growth, and political stability in the Transkei development. It should be a lesson to all who deride the existence of royalty amongst the black people of Africa. The extinction of chiefs of royal families in Africa brought about chaos and confusion.